one anonymous message, 11.5 million documents, and the biggest data leak in history. On April 3, 2016, newspapers around the world published the same story simultaneously. The Panama Papers, 11.5 million confidential documents leaked from a single law firm in Panama, had just exposed the secret financial lives of 12 world leaders, 128 politicians, and thousands of the wealthiest people on Earth. The data covered nearly 40 years of activity. It revealed 214,488 offshore shell companies used to hide money, evade taxes, and move wealth beyond the reach of governments. Within days, a prime minister would resign. Within months, criminal investigations would launch across 79 countries. And the law firm at the center of it all, a company most people had never heard of, would be forced to shut its doors forever. This is the story of the biggest data leak in history. It started with a single encrypted message. In late 2014, an anonymous source contacted Bastian Obermeier, an investigative journalist at the German newspaper Süddeutsche Zeitung. The message was simple: "Hello, this is John Doe. Interested in data?" Obermeier said yes. What followed was the largest data transfer in journalism history. Over the next year, the source, whose identity remains unknown to this day, sent 2.6 terabytes of data. That is more information than the WikiLeaks cables, the Snowden files, the offshore leaks, and the LuxLeaks combined. The source asked for no payment. They demanded no conditions. In a later manifesto, they wrote, "I decided to expose Mossack Fonseca because I believe the firm's founders, employees, and clients should have to answer for their roles in these crimes." One person, acting alone, had just triggered the biggest investigation in journalism history. The documents all came from one place, Mossack Fonseca, a law firm headquartered in Panama City. Founded in 1977 by German-born lawyer Jürgen Mossack and Panamanian novelist turned attorney Ramon Fonseca, the firm had grown into one of the world's largest creators of offshore shell companies. At its peak, Mossack Fonseca employed over 600 people across more than 40 offices worldwide, from Switzerland to Hong Kong, from the British Virgin Islands to New Zealand. Their core business was simple but powerful. They created legal entities in low-tax jurisdictions for clients who wanted to move money outside the view of their home country's tax authorities. Over nearly 4 decades, they set up more than 214,000 offshore entities for clients in over 200 countries. The firm insisted everything was legal, but the leaked documents told a very different story. To understand just how massive this leak was, consider the numbers. 11.5 million documents, including 4.8 million emails, 3 million database entries, 2.2 million PDFs, and over 300,000 scanned files. If you printed every document and stacked them, the pile would stretch more than 7 kilometers high. The data covered 40 years of transactions, from 1977 through early 2016. No single journalist could process this alone. So Süddeutsche Zeitung partnered with the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, the ICIJ, a network that had already handled previous leak investigations. Together, they recruited over 400 journalists from 107 media organizations in 80 countries. For more than a year, they worked in secret, analyzing documents, cross-referencing names, and building the story that would shake the world. But what exactly were these shell companies doing? The mechanism is remarkably simple. A wealthy individual contacts Mossack Fonseca and says, "I need a company." The firm creates a legal entity in a jurisdiction with strong secrecy laws: the British Virgin Islands, Panama, the Seychelles. The company exists on paper but has no employees, no office, no real business operations. It exists for one purpose: to hold assets, bank accounts, real estate, yachts, artwork, all owned not by a person, but by a company whose true owner is hidden behind layers of nominees and intermediaries. The system works because each jurisdiction only sees one layer. Panama doesn't know who the real owner is. The British Virgin Islands don't know where the money came from. And the client's home country doesn't know the company exists. It is not always illegal, but it is almost always invisible. And that invisibility is precisely the point. When the names were finally published, the scale of the exposure was staggering. 12 current or former world leaders appeared in the data, 128 other politicians and public officials, and thousands of wealthy individuals from every corner of the globe. The biggest political shock came from Iceland. Prime Minister Sigmundur David Gunnlaugsson had used an offshore company to hold millions in bank bonds, the same banks he was supposed to be regulating after the 2008 financial crisis. Within 48 hours of publication, thousands of Icelanders surrounded Parliament. Gunnlaugsson resigned within days. In Pakistan, the documents showed that Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif's children owned offshore companies linked to London real estate worth millions. The Supreme Court of Pakistan launched an investigation that ultimately led to Sharif being disqualified from office. In Russia, the trail led to Sergei Rolgin, a classical cellist and close friend of Vladimir Putin. Despite modest earnings as a musician, Rolgin controlled offshore entities linked to transactions worth $2 billion. The Kremlin dismissed the investigation as a Western attack. It was not just politicians. The Panama Papers named some of the most famous people in the world. Football star Lionel Messi, already facing tax fraud charges in Spain, appeared in the documents linked to a Panamanian shell company called Mega Star Enterprises. Actor Jackie Chan was connected to at least 6 offshore companies in the British Virgin Islands. The documents also exposed major banks. Over 500 banks, including HSBC, UBS, and Credit Suisse, had worked directly with Mossack Fonseca to set up offshore structures for their clients. HSBC alone was responsible for more than 2,300 shell companies. The firm had also worked with 33 individuals or companies that had been blacklisted by the U.S. government for alleged links to drug trafficking, terrorism, or rogue nations. The leak did not just reveal tax avoidance. It exposed an entire ecosystem of secrecy. The political and legal fallout was immediate and global. In the first week alone, governments in 79 countries announced investigations. Iceland's prime minister was the first to fall. Pakistan's would follow. In the United Kingdom, Prime Minister David Cameron faced intense scrutiny after the papers revealed that his late father, Ian Cameron, had run an offshore investment fund through Mossack Fonseca for 30 years. Cameron initially dodged questions before admitting he had owned shares in the fund and profited from its sale. In Spain, the industry minister resigned over connections to a company in Jersey. In Chile, a businessman close to the president was charged with tax evasion. Across Europe, Asia, and Latin America, prosecutors opened cases, seized assets, and demanded explanations. Mossack Fonseca itself was raided by Panamanian police in April 2016. Both founders, Jürgen Mossack and Ramon Fonseca, were arrested in 2017 on money laundering charges. The financial consequences were enormous. By 2020, governments around the world had recovered more than $1.36 billion in back taxes and penalties as a direct result of Panama Papers investigations. Australia alone recovered $93 million. Germany collected over $150 million. Colombia recovered $90 million from a single case. Ecuador, the UK, Iceland, Denmark. Every country that investigated found money hidden offshore. And these numbers only represent what governments have been able to recover so far. The ICIJ estimates that between $7.6 trillion and $32 trillion in private financial wealth is held in offshore tax havens globally. The Panama Papers exposed just one firm. One firm, out of thousands operating across dozens of jurisdictions. The true scale of global offshore wealth remains largely hidden. The Panama Papers triggered some of the most significant anti-corruption reforms in decades. The European Union introduced its 5th anti-money laundering directive, requiring member states to create public registers of beneficial ownership, meaning the real people behind shell companies would finally have to be disclosed. The UK created a public register of company ownership and extended it to its overseas territories, including the British Virgin Islands and the Cayman Islands. Panama itself, under intense international pressure, signed its first tax information exchange agreements and agreed to share financial data with other governments. In the United States, Congress passed the Corporate Transparency Act in 2021, requiring companies to report their true owners to the Treasury Department. And Mossack Fonseca, the firm that started it all, announced its closure in March 2018. After 41 years in operation, the world's most notorious creator of shell companies was finished. The Panama Papers did not end the story, they started it. In 2017, the Paradise Papers leaked 13.4 million documents from the offshore law firm Appleby, exposing more politicians and corporations. In 2021, the Pandora Papers, 11.9 million documents, revealed that many leaders had simply moved their offshore structures to different firms after Mossack Fonseca shut down. The leaks keep coming because the system that created them still exists. Tax havens still operate. Shell companies are still easy to create. And the gap between what is legal and what is ethical remains enormous. But the Panama Papers proved something that had never been demonstrated at this scale before, that a single anonymous source, working with investigative journalists, could expose a global system of financial secrecy and force real change. 11.5 million documents, 214,000 shell companies, one anonymous source, and the world has never looked at offshore finance the same way again. The Panama Papers revealed how the world's wealthiest hide their money offshore. But this is just one piece of the puzzle. Subscribe to TaxMap for more stories about the loopholes, strategies, and scandals that shape global taxation. Which offshore leak surprised you the most? The Panama Papers, the Paradise Papers, or the Pandora Papers? Tell us in the comments.